Are you praying that this is the year your curriculum will be perfect for your homeschool? Well, maybe you're new to homeschooling and wonder, what type of curriculum should I get? Well, I have a few curriculum confessions, and do not despair, there is hope. With some simple additions, your curriculum can and will be all you hope for, and so much more.
This is a production of the Ultimate Homeschool Radio Network. Welcome to the Vintage Homeschool Moms Show. Your host, Felice Gerwitz, is an author, a publisher, and your radio show host. She will encourage, educate, and inspire you with answers to your most pressing questions, from homeschool, marriage, parenting, and much more. Felice loves to equip moms to live a Christian life because every moment counts. Be sure to visit her website at mediaangels.com. And here's your host, Felice Gerwitz.
Welcome back to Vintage Homeschool Moms. I'm Felice Gerwitz, your host and a homeschool mom of 32 years. I know, I sound way younger. Well, I hope you think that. Listen, I've learned so much through trial and error and some amazing wins, and today we're going to talk about curriculum confessions, what worked and what didn't, or what worked and what flopped. This is episode 568, and you can find today's show notes at vintagehomeschoolmoms.com. Well, if you've ever wondered if you picked the right curriculum or felt stuck with one that's just not working for you and your family, this episode is for you. We're going to look at practical ideas to help you find what works for your family with a focus on you, not Sally Joe or Sally Jane down the street, or that lady who seems to have it all together with the perfect kids. No, you. Because at the end of the day, if you don't like the curriculum, even if everyone says it's the best, it's not going to work for you and your family. One year at a homeschool conference, I saw this lady who later turned out to be my friend. But at this point in time, I was sitting, probably like you have, in the room, kind of near the middle, and I'm watching her as she parades out each child in a colonial period dress. No kidding. These kids learned about the colonial times, and they sewed these dresses, and they ate the food and whatever. And the whole point of it was she had written a book about unit studies. Well, I just looked at it and said, you have got to be kidding me. I am never going to do a unit study. Well, many years later, I ended up writing a unit studies, a series of them actually, and my children actually loved unit studies. There's so much hype out there, and let's face it, slick campaigns. Even on this podcast, we have commercials. But if we have a commercial and it's on our network, especially if you see it on my show, it is vetted. When I first started homeschooling, we called it the Ultimate Radio Show. And we were just starting out with 20 or so shows, and I had little knowledge really of what I was doing. In fact, this is our 12th birthday, and I usually call it a birthday celebration instead of an anniversary for the network. And when I started it, I had no idea that podcasts were going to explode, and they actually did, and here we are. But I was astounded, and I began to notice that we were getting approached by big companies. And one of them had an online curriculum for all grades. I knew about this company. I had looked at it because a friend was thinking about using it. And I knew this company would not be something I would use for myself or advise others to use. So when I turned down their sponsorship, I received a call from someone important who asked me, "Who are you?" In other words, you're not important enough, was what I read in between the lines. And I'm not sure that they weren't right. I was actually a nobody. I'm a homeschool mom sitting in my, office now, but then, one of the kids' bedrooms, just trying to keep it quiet. And I just asked some of the people that I knew and trusted, and I looked at it myself. So even if somebody says, hey, this is a great, curriculum, or you see the ads on Instagram or Facebook, check it out yourself, because for us to promote a curriculum, it has to be good. My goal for this podcast, as well as for others that represent our network, is to leave you encouraged, equipped, and ready to make choices that bring joy to your homeschool. So let's get started. The truth is, the best curriculum is one that fits your family's unique needs, and that can change from year to year as your kids grow. We didn't do unit studies when my kids were in high school, but we did other things that were better suited for what their goals were. If they were going to college, it was going to be curriculum that they were going to need for their first year of college and onward. And if it was going to be for the trades, then that's what we looked at as well. So look at your family and analyze what you need. Watch your kids at play, or if you have high schoolers, what interests them. You can add a mini unit study to dive deeper into something if your kids are really interested. For example, my kids were really interested in oceanography, and the little chapter that we studied in their elementary book didn't cut it. And even in high school, my son, who was not going to college, took a whole course on oceanography and absolutely loved it. So then we added other things to it so that the younger kids could also learn from what he was learning, and he could teach them certain things. In fact, he would sometimes run out of his room so excited, and he would show me a chapter that he had bookmarked so that we could read it at lunchtime or later as a family. That's what you want. You want a curriculum that's going to interest your kids, that's going to make them excited, and they're going to want to talk to you about it, not something that's drudgery. Okay, let's have true confessions here. There's some subjects you have got to do, like math. And as my kids said, we have calculators and the internet now. Why do we need to know anything about math? Well, it's because you need to understand it so you don't get ripped off. And by introducing them to new topics, you're also going to stretch their minds and push them in ways that's beneficial. We had a saying around here, if a subject is hard, that means you don't know it yet. And so when I would just say something to my children, if they go, "Oh, Mom, this is too hard," and I would just give them the look, that mom look, and then they would say, "Yeah, we know. If we don't know it or it's too hard, that means, we don't know it yet." So, I've talked about curriculum before in episode 536, the best homeschool curriculum. I discussed finding what aligns with you, your children, and your lifestyle. At Kathy Duffy Reviews, she has a really great tool that you can go online and kind of see what your learning style is and those of your children, and you can save it on her website. And, she started homeschooling actually before I did, and she is very vigilant of not allowing any ads or things like that on her site, and nobody actually will see that. So it's just for you to use when you log into her website, and you can save it there. But if you haven't checked it out, check Kathy Duffy out. And trust me, it saved me plenty of mistakes over the years. She didn't have that website when I started homeschooling, but later on she put it together, and I was so happy she did, because then I could refer others to it. One thing to remember is that the focus of your homeschool should be building strong relationships through learning and education, but most of all, prioritizing spending time with the kids. I know we're so big on, we've got to finish this academic subject and that academic subject. And if you're like me, you probably had, a list of things for the kids to do, and they could check it off or write down what books they used. I had my kids do that even when they were younger, because it made them responsible for what they needed to get done. But I know that I cherish the relationships that we built over the years. And my buddy with all my kids know, because I'm the parent, and I made sure they understood that. I was not their friend, I was their mother, but they knew I loved them so much, because that's what moms do. We prioritized activities that were shared, just like I was sharing with you a minute ago with my son, who, found something really interesting in his high school book, and we shared it with his younger siblings. But we also had things like read-alouds and hands-on projects that we worked on, some as a family and some not. Puzzles are a great way to get your family together, and we did some of those 3D puzzles. Let me tell you, they are hard, but I loved it, and now I've passed it on to my grandkids. So we always had something planned, like a science or history fair, even if we only presented to our family. For several years, we participated in science fairs, and my daughter won the competition, placing second in the regional fair and first in the state homeschool fair that they had at the time. My children were not as interested in the bigger competitions, the next group of them that came up. So we kept it to local homeschool fairs, but that was something that I required in our home because it took a lot of planning, a lot of research, and the kids learned so much. I wrote a science fair book that even made the shelves of the libraries across the state and was named as a top book in God's World Publishing. So there's a link in the show notes, and you may want to check that out. And I believe it's available on Amazon as well. It's called The Insider's Guide to Successful Science Fairs. So every opportunity we could incorporate our school into our home was made a priority. We cooked together, we baked, we worked on large family projects together. We taught the kids how to budget. We worked on several gardens. Not that any of them were super successful except for basil. Somehow I can grow basil. But, we did these things not so much to say, oh, look at all the things we could reap from our garden, although that was a bonus, but because we could do it together and study different things that also tied into their curriculum. That didn't mean we didn't have a math curriculum or reading curriculum or language arts, or that we didn't read good books. But it meant that we could do things as a family because I still to this day cherish those relationships, and all of my kids want to homeschool, which is saying a lot. My kids were raised with the goal of being ready for life, not just tests. No snowflakes here. I think sports helped, although I was a reluctant sports mom at first. My biggest complaint about sports is they take up so much time between practices and weekend sports. But aside from that, I spent a great deal of time customizing my own curriculum with living books, nature studies, and creative projects. I eventually wrote books with a co-author who was a scientist, and we developed a 4-book series, the Creation Science Study Guides, that are available on my website, mediaangels.com/store. You can check them out there. My focus was on creating an educational environment that was tailored to our kids. Was it a pain to do? Yes. Was it, an out-of-a-box curriculum? No. And, we had to learn and make adjustments of how we were going to do things as a family and fit in all of the extracurricular things. All right, now we're going to get to some confessions. As a former public school teacher, I only lasted in the system 2 years, but, I was a teacher. I attempted to recreate the school experience at home, and that was a major disaster, or a flop, if you would like to have a little nicer word there, for both of my then only homeschool child and me. He had some learning struggles, and it was just horrible. The all-in-one program that I bought because somebody recommended it was way too rigid, too much busy work, and it took him forever. This is a child who had trouble just gripping a pencil, and here I am with, pages and pages of workbooks, and I just looked at it one night, and I was talking to my husband about it, and I'm like, this is just not going to work for us. So we decided to switch to something that was more flexible. A math book, especially that was a train wreck, was not something that was going to work for us. So what did I do? I ordered another one that was similar to it. And I soon realized that, look, younger grades need to incorporate hands-on learning. And with that small tweak, it became a success instead of an ordeal. Who doesn't want a simple worksheet and M&Ms on the table where you've got to take those M&Ms and put them in groups? And yes, at the end, you can eat them, and I'm like, sometimes I can be like a clean freak. So I had them on a cookie sheet so they weren't touching the table and made the kids wash their hands. But let me tell you, that was so much fun for them. Was it more work for me? Yes, but it was worth it because they were learning. What about phonics? Well, we used real-world learning as much as we could. Sure, we had a phonics program, but we turned it into something fun. We used real-world learning, a straightforward phonics program, and we turned everyday tasks like grocery shopping into math lessons. We kept things engaging and practical. We loved the Nature Center, and my son and daughter learned so much. We had a membership to the Nature Center, and then later on, when the first two were more grown up and I had the next three, we renewed that membership because I remember how much fun we had with the older two. The biggest obstacle for me was changing a curriculum mid-year if I did not like a specific book or topic that we were studying. I had such a hard time. And my husband finally said, well, just give yourself permission to do so. And I said, but do you know what I spent on this book? And he said, the cost is not the best, but it's something we have to do for our family. No one wants to waste money, so often we just plow through and make the best of things, and I have done that as well. But if that is how you feel, then you need to listen to my Vintage Homeschool Moms Help, I Want to Change My Curriculum, because yes, I created a podcast about that. I finally made the mid-year switch, and it brought so much relief and success to our homeschooling. I swear my kids gained 2 years of knowledge that year. Another thing that worked was making time for family discussions centered on books, ideas, and current events. Whenever I see my grandkids, they have so much to say, but one of my grandsons is really quiet. And okay, he's number 3 in a family of 9, but he started working part-time when he turned 16 as part of his homeschool with my husband, who's in construction. So they leave the house around 6:30 or 7 in the morning, and he lives about 30-40 minutes from here. So we offered that he could have one of our spare bedrooms and spend the night. Well, it turns out that this child, who I thought was so quiet, had so many things to say. When I was making dinner, he would ask if I needed help, and I'd say, no, why don't you sit up at the counter? And I would just ask him some leading questions. Oh my gosh, he had so much to say. And it kind of brought him out of his shell because he didn't have all the competition at home with siblings that are way louder or little ones that are typically getting in trouble. So a lot of times conversations can spark curiosity and build critical thinking in ways that no worksheet can. And who would think that going to an auction, a car auction with his uncle, my son, would be such a big deal? He absolutely loved it. In fact, he told his friends about it, and he was telling my older son, he said, you need to bring the little kids to the auction as part of their birthday present. Now, the auction, especially a car auction where the cars are packed in, is not really a safe place to go with little kids. But anybody who is thinking about buying a car, if you have an auction nearby, you can see every make of car. They had school buses. They had a fire truck for sale. I mean, what could be more fun than that? They tried to get their uncle to buy it for them. But of course, where are we putting a fire truck? Thank goodness that was not something that was on the agenda. But it's that kind of thing. It's the things that are outside of the normal. That's what homeschooling is all about. And it just got William talking and talking and talking. On the other hand, a significant drawback is pushing through without any breaks. Now, I've done that before. For example, we were going to take a trip in November, December. So I said, well, we're going to just start school earlier, and we've got to get a lot done before then, because I know once we get back, nobody's going to want to go back to school and do a whole bunch of stuff before the holidays. So I learned that routines were more important rather than rigid schedules. We took short breaks in between subjects when possible. I made time every morning for a devotional where I read a short Bible study or thought of the day, and this allowed us to not burn out and also, again, to have those good discussions. Truthfully, being fully committed and maintaining a strict approach to child discipline was key in our house. I don't put up with a lot. Not that I don't like noise, but I don't like noise for the sake of noise. I don't like a lot of roughhousing or teasing. My husband's way more lenient in that regard than I am. But I felt like discipline is a secret weapon to homeschooling. So again, there's a podcast, of course there is, episode 491, Homeschooling Secret Weapon. And this has more details on the topic. I've also, not that long ago, recorded 1 Minute Discipline, and that's another great one, especially if you have older children. One thing I learned was that I could not be afraid to make a change or thoroughly research before buying a homeschool curriculum. That is one of the things that you have to say, okay, I'm going to really look into it. Just recently, I found out that some of our samples were gone from our website, and one very enterprising mom emailed me and said, hey, do you have any samples? And then I said, oh my gosh, where are the samples that are supposed to be there? And one of the updates on our website, just got rid of those, I guess. So this is a mom who's researching. I don't remember if she bought my books, but that's irregardless. Maybe they fit what she needed and maybe they didn't. That's fine. Remember, what your good friend loves and what works for her family may not work for you. And I had often had friends come over and look at my curriculum, and I did the same if they had books that I was interested in. If you're going to use a curriculum that is not working for your family, it is going to be a disaster. But I always say the end result of a bad day homeschooling is better than the best day in public or private school, even in co-ops. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. So you're going to have to analyze that and say, what I did, and that was I used co-ops when the kids were little. When they were older, I didn't. And everybody that I knew did the opposite. They wanted those co-ops for big science labs and things like that. And I realized that my kids were having, way too much fun and not really learning anything. So we used the time for school at school. And then when the kids wanted to get together and just hang out with their friends, we made time for that. You know what, homeschool moms and dads? You are doing an incredible job, even if you don't think you are. I know at the end of the year, I would say, oh my gosh, we didn't do anything. And then when I started putting together our portfolio, which I do have another podcast for that, which I did not link here, but we started keeping our portfolios of work that we'd accomplished throughout the year. So I wasn't killing myself at the end of the year with my kids trying to gather samples of our work. But I just found, oh my gosh, look at how much we did. I so missed the days of traveling and speaking at homeschool conferences. There I was able to meet you face to face and spend the entire time discussing and helping families, because I feel that we need someone to encourage us, and that's what I was able to do. Even if it meant sending them off to buy someone else's curriculum instead of my unit studies, I listened and I advised accordingly. I met a really good friend of mine. She wasn't at the time, but she wanted to meet the crazy lady who people said sent her, sent them to buy her curriculum. And I said, well, they were starting out and they were unsure of what they were going to do. And they wanted to do some hands-on things. So I sent them to check out your curriculum, and it's called Considering God's Creation, and they're still publishing today. So you can check them out. But if you want an in-depth study guide, that's where we shine. You can keep experimenting and keep adjusting and know that every step forward is a win, and you can do this. So if you would do me a favor, share this episode with a friend who's looking into curriculum choices, and let's keep encouraging each other. Please visit the website and leave a personal comment. You can do that on the post where this podcast resides. I know most of you are listening on a phone or device or even in your car, but you can visit the website or check me out on social media, and I'd love to hear what's working for you or any way I can help you. Thanks again for joining me today. Keep homeschooling, and remember, you are not alone. Check out the points that are a synopsis of this podcast on the show notes at Vintage Homeschool Moms. Take care, everyone. God bless, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Vintage Homeschool Moms Show. Visit Felice at MediaAngels.com and to VintageHomeschoolMoms.com. Vintage Homeschool Moms is a production of the Ultimate Homeschool Radio Network.